morning. Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well. And I hope everyone had a wonderful weekend. And I hope that we can take a time and kind of explore the challenges and the differences and why we as a people see the differences between immigrants, immigration, and historical facts that people seem to not concern themselves with. Um, See, me, I could never, ever, ever look at my history and not feel deeply rooted in the challenges and the fights of my grandfather, great grandfather, great great grandfather, my father. And I say that to say this, please bear with me. And this this video or this message is not to offend anyone. It actually is more for educational purposes. Um, what do you see on this screen? What you see on the screen is actually the death certificate of my great great grandfather, John Quincy Eubanks. Um, he was born in Georgia, 1852. Let that sink in for a minute, okay? My great great grandfather was born 1852. Um, my great grandfather was born 1881. I want that to sink in for a minute, okay? My great grandfather was born 1881. See, a lot of our new generations don't know their history, and I think that was done by design. But just to stay on focus on task and the reason why I'm making this video, and I don't want to spend a whole lot of time, just going through it. I want to get to the point. Okay, my great grandfather, once again, was born 1881. My grandfather was born 1903. Okay, my grandfather, let me say that one more time. My grandpa was born 1903. Great man. He had the biggest impression on me in my youth. And he died in 1987. I wasn't even a teenager yet, but he had a most profound effect on my life. Obviously, as you see there, I was named after my great uncle, meaning my grandfather's brother. Okay? In February 17th, 1900, if you look, you'll see that my great uncle, he served in the U.S. Army in Korea. Okay? Let me repeat that again. My great uncle served in the military, specifically in Korea. Every single male in my family served in the military for the United States of America. Every single male in my family fought for the liberties and the freedoms of America as a whole. World War One, World War Two, the Vietnam War specifically, even in Operation Desert Storm. Now, the purpose of explaining that to you is because when we speak about the immigrants and we talk about Kamala Harris and we talk about, you know, civil liberties and things of that nature, I want to touch base on why there is such an uproar in regards to all the benefits and the problems associated with um, we as a country are being flooded with migrants. For it's not for a purpose of you can't have a country when you have open borders, and when you have people come from cultural different places, their loyalties or where they identify comes from them other places. And America is unique. We are a melting pot. However, you know, what I want to say to you, and I don't want to get long winded, I want to show you one more piece of information just to give you another background of who I am. If you look, you see that says Louis Eubanks. That's my great grandfather. That's my grandfather's dad. Okay? So that now that I made that, I'll make that smaller again. Because really, what I want to do is I want to touch base on immigrants, Haitian immigrants, Jamaican immigrants, all immigrants, if you will. And, you know, foundational black Americans, or ADOS, African descendants of slaves. We are American. We are 400 years in America. 400 years we were born on this soil in United States of America, and our fathers and grandfathers and great grandfathers fought and died for civil liberties. We were the one who experienced chattel slavery. You know, when we talk about slavery all over the world, you talk about the Caribbean, Jamaica, and all those islands. You had the French, you had the British. Those governments owe reparations to people and the descendants of those Caribbeans. America owes, obviously, descendants of chattel slavery from America. However, you know, my issue is illegal immigration. My problem is when people come over here to America, they say, "Oh, African descendants of slaves or black Americans," because Haitians are Haitians. Okay? Jamaicans are Jamaicans. Ghanaians are Ghanaians. Nigerians are Nigerians. All those other people just started coming over here. They don't have 100 years on this soil. Their families and cultures are vastly different than the American experience. And, you know, I admire them because that's good. You have your own culture. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with supporting your own people. There's nothing wrong with coming from those places and wanting a better life for your people. The issue has more to do with, you know, not respecting people who is here before you and saying, "Oh, all these benefits, why aren't blacks doing better? We come here, we work here." That's because it's like, I'll use an example of, imagine if you were sick or somebody cut off your toes and then they ask you to run a race. Now, what I admire about a lot of cultures, if you will, is I admire that you guys really retain your history. And that had a lot to do with your mothers and your fathers instilling in you at a young age those cultures. But here in America, what happened was they decimated our properties. You've heard of the Black Wall Street. There was well over 60 towns that were decimated, just like the Black Wall Street. There were things like eminent domain. Okay? There was also, after wars, there's lawsuits currently about people who served in the wars who dealt with the fallout and they lost their lives in regards to that. But more specifically and more importantly, directly, you got to think about Jim Crow laws. Then you got to think about the war on drugs, or the epidemic of drugs that took place back in the 50s and the 60s. Back then, the drug of choice was heroin. Then you had the crack epidemic. Then you had the AIDS epidemic. Then you had, at the same time of the AIDS epidemic, you had mass incarceration. And what I want you to do is to ask yourself, what group of people dealt despairingly with all of those things? What group of people fought and died for the civil rights that a lot of people enjoy today? What group of people who was disproportionately affected by the Freedmen's Bank going under? What group of people was disproportionately affected by the crack epidemic? What group of people was profoundly affected by the welfare state? And when I say the welfare state, I'm saying, laws stated that mothers and children couldn't get benefits if dad was in the house. That was a separation of family. What group of people was disproportionately affected? That's what you have to ask yourself. Then, what communities was disproportionately policed? Which group of people dealt with those things? Now let's talk about the divorce rate. Let's also talk about the homeless rate. Let's also talk about the mental illness, mental health. What group of people was disproportionately affected by those? Let's also talk about Planned Parenthood. Let's say that again, Planned Parenthood. Let's talk about those things. So what I equate those two is saying somebody who's born healthy competing with someone who's born with some disabilities, however, is expected to compete on the same level. It's virtually impossible. It's even that way with the sexes. How about giving one group a whole lot of benefits and telling another group, no, lift yourself up by your bootstraps? And I'm not going to sit here and spend a lot of time talking about this stuff, but those are the things that you got to really ask yourself, I admire those groups who was able to stick together in their cultures, However, I'm not asking for sympathy. I just want people to be more aware of the different challenges that each group of people have. We, as African descendants of slave, or FBA, Foundation of Black Americans, have a unique set of challenges that other people all over the world did not have to experience. And we're still fighting every day for the rights. What some people don't realize and fail to realize is we still are lacking behind, not because there's systemics in place, which there is still. I think it has to do more with prejudice. People just don't understand other people's plights and challenges and experiences. And the world is becoming so insensitive to that. Look around the world. There's other groups of people that are oppressed, and we are extremely desensitized to the atrocities that's being committed in these war-torn countries. Just because America don't have a war where people are being killed, there is still economic warfare, social warfare, but more importantly,